and what kind of fire they're doing, whether it's direct or indirect. Armor has and these large infantry units both have direct and indirect weapons. Direct fire is stronger, but you can be fired upon by the defender. If you do indirect fire, you aren't fired upon by the defender. At the moment, we don't have any units with range on the map. There's no artillery units, so only units that are adjacent to the defender will be involved in the combat. So we're going to try to pummel this guy with all four of these units. So there's only one defending unit. It will choose which, the German player will decide which attacking unit that is conducting direct fire it will fire at. Now, if this guy wasn't disrupted, he would be able to fire also in the attack on this unit because he is adjacent to units doing direct fire. So that makes it a little more difficult for the attacker because unlike other games, enemy units that aren't actually under direct attack can assist the defending unit. So he's going to fire at this infantry unit here. It's a motorized infantry unit, and it's more vulnerable to fire than an armor unit. That's why the German player is selecting to fire at this motorized infantry unit. So now I am going to show you the combat table and take a moment to describe what's going on with it. I have to do this, then I have to do this, and this. Okay. So this big thing is everything you need to know in order to do combat. There's a defensive, sorry. Do you see my cursor when I roll over this thing? Just a question.
Not seeing the cursor move at all.
Okay, I guess that's because I'm looking at a window as opposed to my whole screen. That's what I'm sharing. Okay, so I'll try to talk through this. So the upper left quadrant of this is a defensive fire table. The lower left, or across the entire bottom, is the offensive fire table. And in the right column are what's called situational effects of combat. So this system takes into account all kinds of different variables and elements that can contribute to the outcome of a given combat. And that's similar in some ways to what I did with the enemy action series, if you've played either of those games, Ardennes or Kharkov. But here it's done in a tabular form instead of a chit draw form. So I guess if I could zoom in. Do you know if it's possible for me to zoom in on a screen share?
John, you have to zoom in on your actual PDF on your computer, and that would show us as
Oh, gotcha. Is that the voice of Harold?
from the heavens, yes.
Thank you, Harold. All right, let me see if that did it. Your stream is still running. We paused this preview to save you resources. Are you seeing the screen? My share?
Yeah. We can still see everything.
I
Yep.
can't see a thing.
Yeah, zoomed in on
Here.
zoomed in
Now-
on the
yeah, now
defensive
I
fire.
got it. All right. So I zoomed in on a close-up of the defensive fire table. So the matrix here, across the top is terrain, and this is the terrain the attacker is occupying. And because the attacker is doing direct fire, the defender is firing at that attacker as they come in from that terrain. So unfortunately now you can't see the vassal, but all of the allied units are attacking from clear terrain. So that's good for the defender. The defender, so the across the top of the table is terrain, and then the fire strength of the defender determines the column that you will use, and then it's a die roll, a d6 modified by the unit type of the target. So if you recall, the German unit chose to fire at a motorized infantry. So on the table just to the right of the list just to the right of the table shows unit types. And so that the top line is what the modifier is. If that unit were firing at armor, the modifier is 0. Armor in a city is a little more vulnerable. Then the third one is armored recon units. Then we have mech infantry. Then we have infantry, including motorized infantry. That's the infantry symbol with the 2 little dots in it. That's a +3, so that target is way more vulnerable than armor. So that's going to be adding 3 to the roll. So if we look at this table, we're looking for the strength of the defender's direct fire strength is a 5. So there's the 5 column. Again, I can't highlight for you what I'm talking about, but I hope you can see the column that says 5, 6. That's in the clear row. That's the column we'll be using, and then we'll be rolling a 6-sided die and adding 3. And I'm just going to go back and do that, and you'll have to trust my roll. In the vassal mod, I rolled a 5. So back to here, on the 5, in that column, we're adding 3 to the 5 because we're firing at motorized infantry, and that is an 8 result. I mean, the die roll is an 8 modified, and the result is a 2C. So that's 2 hits against the target, and I'll get into hits in a moment, and there's a situational result of C. I am now going to move over. So this is where a lot of kind of additional elements of combat and of unit type and of coordination and of support come into play. Many combat results have one or more conditionals, also affecting supply expenditure. In this example, a C means if the target is not in clear terrain, you have to expend a supply point. Another result, like an F, would mean it would be -1 hits if the majority of units firing were indirect, or if units from more than one formation were firing. Well, this was a single unit firing direct, so that wouldn't have mattered. And R result can mean that the German defenders have to retreat 2 hexes instead of 1. An A result would have a negative effect if you were firing artillery. An E result would have a positive effect if you included engineers in the attack, but the engineers haven't arrived, aren't on the board yet, so the Allies couldn't have done that. Anyways, these letters create more variability in the range of possibilities in a combat. In this case, it could have been an additional supply expenditure if the combat wasn't in clear terrain, but that was not the case. So it's just a 2. So let's remember that when we go back to our vassal. I'm getting faster at this. Okay. But I have to remember, touching the picture of the vassal screen is not the same thing as touching the vassal. All right, now I'm back in vassal. So the Germans were firing at this unit, the 7-4, is a guards armored motorized infantry unit, and got a 2 result. For the attacker, a hit can be applied by disrupting, which means you're out of the combat, and won't be able to do anything for the rest of the turn, or by taking a step. So you in this case, he could lose a step and stay in the combat. Or he could have taken 2 steps, which probably he wouldn't want to do. So it's since he took 2 hits, he will choose to disrupt and lose a step. If he had taken just 1 hit, the allied player might decide to have him disrupt and preserve him, or to take a step and keep him in the combat. But in this case, with 2 hits, he's going to take the step loss and a disruption. So that was a tough result for that allied unit. But there are several others attacking in this. So since there's only 1 German unit defending and no other German units adjacent to allies that are doing direct fire, that shot was the only shot the defender gets before the allies do their fire with offensive fire. So where's the there? Let me put the guy who wasn't disrupted on top. Here we go. So remaining on the allied side, now the defensive fire is done. By the way, if the Germans had artillery in the area, they could have fired at the attackers, but there's no artillery in the area. There's one way down here that is out of range. He only has a range of 3. Okay, so the Allies have a combined strength of 7, 5 is 12, 5 is 17. So this is a big attack. It's kind of the big opening attack. And the Allied strength is combined, and they do 1 large fire against the everyone in the target hex. So now we're going to go back to the combat table. And we're going to scroll down the table to the offensive fire portion. Okay, now I see that. And good. Okay, so offensive fire, we said that the Allied total strength was 17. The defender is in mixed terrain. It's that light brown color. So on our offensive fire table, we go over to 17, which is 16 to 19. So we're on the 4th from the right column. And our target is infantry. So that's a +3. Whoops, can you see? You can't see the... Let me widen this. That's too wide. This is really taxing my ability to manipulate things. Okay. It almost fits. Okay. Right. So I was talking about the modifier. Again, there's modifiers for offensive fire based on the terrain of the defender. If you see in this list here, infantry is about halfway down, and they have a modifier of +3. They do not have good protection. The only protection they're getting is that because they're in the mixed, the column being used is better than if they were in the clear. So with a strength of 17 and a +3, the Allies will get their die roll. I'm going to tell you what I rolled. I rolled a 2. Okay. Back here. So looking at the chart, mixed 17 of rolls that the roll was a 2, and we're adding 3 for the modifier, makes a roll of 5. So the result is 2FA. Okay. F, looking at our table of situational results, means -1 if the majority of units were firing indirect, none were firing indirect, or units from more than one formation were declared for fire. So this is an impact of trying to coordinate different formations in a single attack. But in this case, all the units were in guards armored. So there is no penalty for that. So the F doesn't have an effect. The other conditional was the A. That would have had an effect if artillery was firing. Supply points would have had to have been spent, but no, artillery wasn't firing. So the result is a 2. Going back now to the Okay. So on the board, the result was a 2. So that wasn't a very good outcome for the Allies. The higher die roll would have been better. The German unit, in order to satisfy a 2 result, can disrupt, can take a step, or the defenders can retreat. The attackers can't retreat. So he's going to be able to, he has a choice here. He will definitely retreat. If he didn't retreat, he would lose a step and disrupt in place. And that means he would lose his ZOC. I think he wants to keep his ZOC, his zone of control, because the zone of control really restricts Allied movement. So he's going to retreat 1 and take a step. That way he still has his zone of control, which will inhibit Allied movement. So, and then the Allies can do an advance after combat. Stacking in this game is 2 units, but it's also 5 steps. So this stack I'm showing here is at its stacking limit of 5. So when the Allies advance, they have to keep that in mind also. So we'll advance both of these units in. The terrain, again, is they moved from a clear hex into a mixed hex. The infantry can enter any kind of hex. The armor cannot enter polder, which is this green color, cannot cross streams except at bridges, cannot enter forest. So the armor is much more restricted. Furthermore, let's say this German unit was here. Since an armor unit can't enter polder terrain, the armor unit can only participate in an attack on that unit by using its indirect fire strike. Inability to move into a hex also means you can't do direct fire into it. Even if the road doesn't help with that, you have to be able to enter a hex by not using the road. I'll get into that a little more when we get into movement, which actually is going to be next.
We'll do another combat with the 1st Airborne in a few minutes. Any questions at the moment? If not, I'm going to continue to the next part of the sequence.
Sequence of play, which is movement. So 30 Corps here is going to get to move now. Where's this? Oh, that should be okay. Okay. So because of the Germans being disrupted in a couple places, the Allies have some flexibility with their initial movement here. Again, every unit has a movement allowance of 6. But a zone of control costs 1 extra, an enemy zone of control costs 1 extra movement point to enter and costs 2 to leave. If it's a heavy zone of control, like this unit, because it has a little H, a unit moving adjacent to it must stop, even if it has movement allowance remaining. If it has a light zone of control like this unit, the unit may continue moving but must continue to pay costs to enter and leave its ZOC. So this unit here, if this armor unit